Today I've got a repair and diagnostic video featuring an HP computer from one of my clients that has stopped working. And I'm sure the fact that it's an HP computer has absolutely nothing at all to do with that. Now, those of you familiar with my channel know that I am no fan of HP. I've often said that in the technician world, I've shared with you that we say HP stands for horrible products. It's kind of an internal thing we techs in the industry share with each other. Although I'm trying to get that information out to the customers. This customer of mine has bought several systems from me over the years, none of which have required any repairs, whereas this HP computer does require a repair from the same customer. So that's not for me to brag and tell you how great my custom builds are. You're misinterpreting if that's what you concluded. No. What I am asserting is that if you build it yourself, it'll be better than anything you can buy from specifically HP, but probably anything you can buy from anybody. One of the questions I'm often asked is, will I ever show how to build a laptop? And despite how many times I keep answering this question, I keep getting it. So I'm trying to find a more clever way to answer it. So I guess I'm just going to say this. If you guys know a place that sells the laptop case, motherboard, all the stuff that goes together, the screen, to make a laptop, please send me the link. And I don't mean to make a specific laptop. I want a choice of motherboards, I want a choice of batteries, I want a choice of screen sizes, I want a choice of cases, just like with desktops. So if anybody is aware, anybody out there in the world watching this video, if you are aware of any place that sells laptop parts enough to build your own laptop, please send me that link. Until then, please stop asking me if I can build a laptop for you guys. All right. So I don't know if that's sarcastic enough for you, but I'll just try to put it out there, try to make it clear. And I think I'll just have to remember this part in this video, so when I get that question in the future, and I will, then I'll just point them to this video so I don't have to keep repeating myself, so I don't have to keep repeating myself, so I don't have to keep repeating myself. All right. So the customer says this thing doesn't work. So when I ask the customer, what does that mean? It doesn't work. So what does that mean? Well, it doesn't do anything. Okay. So this is one of the frustrations a technician has with a customer, and it's all on how you ask the question. What happens when you hit the power button? Nothing. So if I were to hit the power button right now, it does the same as when it's all plugged in. Yes. Okay. Got a dead computer. It's interesting because, and coincidental, that my #1 most viewed video is how to repair a dead computer. That's what it's titled. I guess that's a good title. So if this title looks familiar to you, that's why I'm reusing it, because that title seemed to work well. And that video was shot years ago when I had the SD camera and just using the in-camera microphone. So quality is much improved since then, and it's time to do an update. And I have no idea what's wrong with this computer. Everything you're about to see is happening on camera as I'm experiencing it for the first time. So I'm hoping in the process that you'll understand the frame of mind that I'm taking. If you should ever have a computer problem that you want to self-diagnose, or whether it's yours or a friend of yours, what's the diagnostic process? So the first part is that we have to verify what the problem is. I did not verify this when I picked it up from the customer. I just picked it up and said I'll deal with it when I take it back to my office. So one of the first things I noticed here on the back is they have an Ethernet port here and here. Now, this suggests to me that this is probably a 100 megabit per second port, and this is a gigabit port. You'll also see they've got a video card down here, and they've got a video card here. So I'm guessing we're not going to be using any of this stuff because it's probably all disabled, except for the USB and the audio. Everything else you can ignore. But at this point, I only point that out because I have to plug a monitor into it. It won't do me any good to plug the monitor in here, right? Because I won't get an accurate diagnostic if I'm plugged into a video card that's not enabled. So we got to plug in up here. I'm not going to use the network ports right now because when you're diagnosing a computer, you only want the very basic things plugged in. You want to disconnect any printers, any USB drives, anything that's not necessary for the computer to boot, because sometimes computers boot when you unplug one of those things. And there's no real diagnostic to be done inside of the computer. At that point, you've got a bad device or a bad cable or something else is going on. So let's verify the problem, because customers, they don't always tell you the truth. And I'm not suggesting that customers purposely lie, but I do think that sometimes they do, but sometimes they just simply don't know enough to be able to explain the problem accurately, and that's why they've hired you to do it. So let's verify it. So I've got my monitor out, I've got my DVI cable here. We're going to plug that in right in the proper, should be the proper video card right back here. There we go. I've got my USB keyboard and mouse. By now you're all familiar with that. We'll plug that in back here. And then finally, we've got the power cable. So let's plug that in. And I do get a green light here on the back that tells me that power supply should be working. Okay, so far so good. Let me come around and we're going to turn the keyboard on, and well, it's already turned on. Good. Monitor's on, everything's good. We stand off to the side. Let's hit the power button. Well, it does turn on. It is not what the customer described. So I hear the fans, and I think this is probably what the customer is explaining, is that nothing happens here. So where do you start in your diagnostic with regards to figuring out what's causing this problem? Well, the first thing is, don't be too fast. Don't be impatient. While I'm talking, I'm actually biding my time just to see if anything will appear on the screen behind me. And then once enough time has passed, I would say usually 30 seconds to 90 seconds. Shouldn't take more than 90 seconds on average to see something. Then it's safe to assume or to conclude at that point that something is wrong internally that needs repair. This is not a software problem because we can't even get into the software yet. And I need to take a step back to say the first part after you've asked the customer what's wrong is then to determine if you think that sounds like a software problem or a hardware problem. And on really difficult problems, sometimes you have to just pull the hard drive from the computer, or you don't have to pull it physically, but pull the cable off of it and hook up a spare hard drive and reinstall the operating system and see if you can replicate the problem. If the problem replicates on a fresh install, it's probably hardware. It's really that simple. Now, during all this yakking that I'm doing, nothing is happening here. But it is interesting to me that the system does turn on. It does power up. But that doesn't automatically mean the problem's not our power supply. I'm going to hold the power button in and see if it'll turn off after about 10 seconds. And it does. So there's some communication between the motherboard and the power supply that is working. Now, before you work on the inside of a computer, it's important you unplug it from power. People talk about being grounded, but you don't want an earth ground, not when you're working on the inside of electronics. An earth ground, should you have a short, will have that electricity flow right through your body and definitely into the earth ground. You'll likely sustain a very, very, very serious injury or death. And for that reason, I cringe every time somebody says that you should have the computer plugged in and flip the switch on the back of the power supply to off. There's a number of problems with that recommendation. The first one is clearly this person is no electrical engineer or has any formal academic electrical education. And you don't need one to make a YouTube video. I mean, look, I'm doing it. The second thing is there's no power switch on the back of this power supply. I'm pretty sure HP saved about a quarter of a penny by removing it. So, those quarter of a pennies add up. And the reason why consumers buy these pieces of junk, again, my opinion, is that they're cheap. And the reason they're cheap is because they're built cheap. So in this industry, you really do get what you pay for. There are some PC builders that will make a pretty good profit, but they're very niche. We're talking like Falcon Northwest and Alienware and things like that, where there's a much more profit margin. Generally speaking, regardless if you buy a $400 computer or a $2,400 computer, in most cases the markup that can be made from that is about 10%. The only reason I still build computers, it clearly isn't for the money, but it's for the fact that I enjoy it. And of course the money comes into with service. Now, computers I build have a 1-year warranty, so I'm not going to make any money on service for a year after I built it. So we'll go back to the fact that I enjoy it. And I enjoy diagnosing too. This is basically a puzzle solving exercise, and I guess I like solving puzzles. So let's go ahead and open up the HP. But you remember, HP does something nobody else does. All the screws they use are Torx bits. In this case, T15. In many cases, T15. You got to remember that if you're ever going to work on an HP computer. Even just to take the side panel off, they don't want you in there. Because heaven forbid, if you saw what was in there and you knew what you were looking at, you'd realize you paid too much. But anyway, let's go ahead and let's take it apart. That's going to be the first thing we've got to do here. And we'll start by simply just removing the side panel. Come on. There we go. Let's see what we're working with. Well, we've got a lot of dust in there, first and foremost. And the first thing I'm curious about, where I'm drawn to, are two particular things. One is the power supply, and two is the video card. To me, these, in my experience, are the most likely culprits of what can cause this behavior. Could also be a motherboard, could also be a CPU, could also be RAM. Potentially could be any single component or cable in the system that's causing this. So I'm going to start by just looking to see if this fan spins easily with my fingers, and it does. Oftentimes on these video cards, you can't turn that fan, or it requires some effort, and that's all I need to know. In this case, that fan looks like it's going to spin okay. I want to verify that, so I'm going to turn this on, and we're just going to look and see that all the fans are spinning as they should. So with the cover off, we're going to plug it back in. Again, the DVI cable will be first. And then we save the power cable for last. And now I'm going to turn it on, and I just want to verify our exhaust fan is turning, our CPU fan is turning, video card fan is turning, and I'll look here on the back. Power supply fan is turning. So that's a good start. I don't know if you can tell, just, there's big dust bunnies in here. This thing is absolutely filthy. Looks like we've got 2 hard drives in here, and the customer really wants the data off the drives. They don't really care if this is fixed or not, but I just got to know what it is. So first I'm going to hold the power button in, make sure it's off, pull the cable. Sometimes there can be residual power in the capacitors on the board, so if you hit the power button, did you see the fan spin just then, even though nothing was attached? It's like magic. Where'd that power come from? That power was stored on the capacitors, and it will slowly drain out. But if you're in a hurry and you go yank that video card out and plug another one in before you've drained those capacitors or given them enough time to drain on their own, you might see a big spark, and well, chances are you're going to have to be replacing a motherboard and who knows what else, probably a video card too. If that, I'm very specific with that example. You could just wonder why. All right, so to get the video card out, we got another T15. So to get these cards out, HP requires this little retention plate to be taken out. And now the video card should just slide right out of there. Ooh, what is it? I'm not even sure what it is. Probably I don't want to know. But I'm going to just grab a spare, any PCI Express video card should be fine for diagnostics, so I always have a few laying around. Let me go grab one, I'll be right back. This is an old Radeon X1300, I think it's 256 megs of RAM. It's great because there's no fan on it, it's completely silent, and it's a great test card for me to just slap into any system. I know this card works, it'll probably work for years and years and years. We're going to just put that in place here. And the PCI Express slots, you don't want to be too hard on those. So it's important to get everything lined up properly before you add the downward force to plug the card in, or you could break the slot. This is all real easy stuff. It's just being aware of what your limit should be with regards to how much force and effort you put into getting hardware installed. I always say never force anything. Now I'm going to go ahead and plug power in here, and we're going to turn the video, or sorry, going to turn the computer back on. I just want to see if this makes any difference at all if we get any video. And it is not making any difference. Nothing is happening. So just go ahead and pull power. The next thing I want to check is the power supply. But before we get ahead of ourselves, I want to undo what I've done here. I want to put the original video card back in. Take this one out. Plug this one back in. And you'll see these video cards, they just run off the PCIe bus power. There's no power cord from the power supply like a modern gaming card would have. They don't draw that much power. The great thing about testing a power supply, first of all, I don't recommend those power supply testers. I think those are a waste of time and a waste of money. To me, a spare power supply is cheaper and more accurate and faster. So let me go grab one. So a couple of diagnostic parts I use the most would be PCI Express video cards and power supplies. These are the most common things that go wrong on computers. And it's very common for people to just automatically assume there's no sense in testing the power supply because the system comes on. And I wish being a technician was really that easy. But the fact is, when you don't know what's wrong, you have to test everything. You can assume nothing. Now, the only two things I need to pull on the power supply are the motherboard power cables. So that's the large 24-pin cable and the smaller CPU power cable down here in the corner, if that's not blocking your view. And then I'm just going to put this in here really quickly. I should mention there are some manufacturers that like to use their own proprietary power supplies, but you'll find that out soon enough if you work on one because your connectors won't fit. So you shouldn't have any worries there. Let's see, this should be CPU power right here. And that'll go, where's that gonna go? Right down here. Just like that. Okay. Once again, plug the video card back in. And we're going to plug power back in. And turn it back on. That's not going to work if I don't plug the power into the right power supply. You saw that, right? Did you catch it? All right. All right, that's going to go down here. Make sure the switch is in the off position. You don't want to give yourself a shock. That would not be fun. Flip the power switch on. Now you see there's a little green light down here on the bottom of the motherboard that's identifying or confirming, I'll get that word out, that it has power. So this is all starting up. Power supply fans running. This is just a 500 watt Antec basic brand power supply. And it's great, again, for diagnostics. Heck, I wouldn't even mind putting this in a system. Not one I would sell to a customer. But it's just a great power supply. So it's good that it has a second life after its first life, which was powering a computer for I don't know how many years. And now it's kind of retired and it just kind of does this part-time, very part-time. So this has made no difference whatsoever. Well, no, that's interesting. The system just turned itself off. I didn't do that. That's very, very interesting. So I'm going to unplug this. And here's what I know so far. I know most likely whatever this problem is not the video card and it's not the power supply. And that's basically the process of diagnosing, is that we're figuring out what isn't broken. You get it? Because once we've gone through every single component, all we're going to be left with, basically, if we go all the way down, will be the CPU and motherboard combination. That'll be all that's left. And I very rarely have ever seen a bad CPU. And these motherboards are so expensive. You purchase them on eBay, they ship out of China in most cases. You don't know what you're getting with regards to quality. It makes more sense to just buy a new computer than to repair these. One of the things I don't like about them. So anyway, I just want to try this one more time because I don't like the way the power supply cable was seated. And I didn't notice that until I pulled the cable off. Half the little 4-pin addition to it just kind of fell off. And I expect it to have a little more resistance than that. So I just want to make sure it was plugged all the way in. It looks like everything is still the same. Nothing has changed. And so what do we do now? So I'm going to just, you know what, I'm just going to pull that. We're going to pull this and that and that. And we'll just set this down here for right now. So I'm just simply going to put this back the way it was, since it seems the power supply in fact is fine, the video card is fine. So what's the next step? The next step is that we could have a problem with the hard drives or anything plugged into the motherboard. So I want to go ahead and unplug these hard drives back here. This is a tight squeeze back here. There we go. There's 2 drives. You can't see the solid state drive behind this. Apparently we've got a storage drive and a boot drive. And this thing's gone through a lot of upgrades, you see. You see it's got the video card upgrade, the network card upgrade, and the hard drive upgrade. In fact, I think even the storage drive was not stock, because this is a Western Digital Black, and the Western Digital Black drives are known for performance. Anything that's known for performance is going to cost more. There's no way this computer shipped with that drive. It would have shipped probably with a Western Digital Blue for cost reasons. So I'm guessing that was upgraded. As for RAM, we've got 4 sticks of RAM here, and that could also be a problem. If one of those sticks is bad, it could create a situation where the system won't even post. And the post, of course, is the power on self-test. It's the first thing you see every time you boot up any computer. I'm also going to disconnect the optical drive for the exact same reason that if the optical drive circuitry in any way has been damaged or has failed, then of course it could prevent the whole system from starting. Now, if I could just get the SATA cable off, you can see how tight of a fit that is. There are easier ways to do this, but I'm just trying to do this quickly for the camera. Okay. Now we've disconnected all the drives from the motherboard. We don't have any unnecessary components plugged in on the back. In fact, I'm even going to unplug my keyboard and mouse dongle because I've seen that cause systems not to boot. And let me grab my power cable again. Let's go back up to the power supply and let's try again. Okay, nothing is changing. So we know it's not the power supply, it's not the video card, and it's none of the drives or SATA cables. You see how I'm working my way down this chain, right? You're starting to get this? Or did you get it the first time? So, and I might say it a third time later, just to make sure. All right, so now the question is, where do you go from here? Well, we don't need this network card, and this network card could be causing the problem. So I'm going to pull the network card out, and we'll plug the cable back in. Now, you don't have to do it one at a time. I could have pulled the drives and the network cable, and if the system would have booted, I simply wouldn't have known which of those things it was, only that it was one of those things. By doing it one thing at a time, when you get a result, you know it was that last thing you did. However, it takes longer. So there's no real right or wrong way to do it as long as you get to the proper conclusion at the end of it. Obviously, none of this is making any difference whatsoever. So another thing we can try to do is to clear the motherboard BIOS. And I'm simply looking on the board to see if we have some sort of a jumper to clear the BIOS. And this can happen from time to time, where the BIOS just gets corrupted, or sometimes a low power situation like a brownout can cause a little spike, and then the BIOS gets confused and it causes a corruption. And when that happens, in most cases you can recover it. There's usually a little jumper on the motherboard to clear the BIOS, and I'm just looking for that right now and I don't see it. But I do see this battery right here. And this little battery, when they go bad, they're the thing. The battery holds the date and the time. It also holds your whole PC's configuration, such as what hard drives you've got and things like that. And those batteries don't last forever, although they typically last for 3 to 7 years in most cases. So I'm going to get a little jeweler's screwdriver. We're going to remove that battery and let the motherboard sit, let it drain. All right, I've got my little jeweler's screwdriver here, and I'm just going to reach up and push this. There's a little lever right above the battery that's holding the battery in place. It kind of sits over it. If I lift that up, battery comes out. There's our battery. Now I got to get my battery tester. Now, if you're familiar with my past videos, you've seen me use this before. It's just a cheap battery tester I bought on eBay. I think it came out of China or something. Just a couple of bucks, but it'll do the job. I just want to put the battery down on this. And the battery is borderline good. So it's not completely dead. It could be replaced, but it's not completely dead, and it's not in the red zone. So I would say it's not a battery issue. We can remove that from our list of things that are possible causes for this problem. Of course, we want to verify obviously that we have no power here. We have the power switch. We want that CMOS, or that BIOS. I don't want to confuse you. The CMOS holds the BIOS. The CMOS is a complementary metal oxide semiconductor, and a BIOS is a basic input-output system, but you don't need to know that. Just they're related. So oftentimes when people mention the CMOS or the BIOS, sometimes there's even UEFI on the latest. A lot of times they're referring to what we're talking about here, which I'm referring to as the BIOS. Even if it's UEFI, I still call it BIOS. But anyway, again, you don't need to know any of that unless you want to be a professional technician and it's on a test. I'd say I never had a customer ask me, but I suppose that's not true. Customers have asked. And usually when I tell them what it means, it doesn't help at all. But anyway, I'm going to let this sit for a minute, make sure the BIOS drains, and then we'll come back and put the battery back in and see what happens. All right, well, hopefully we've given that enough time. I would actually, in a perfect situation, if I had more time and if I wasn't making a video out of this, would probably let it sit at least an hour. It's only been about 5 minutes, but that really should be enough time, with the keyword being should. I'm just putting the battery back in it. And the bottom of the battery goes in first, below the clip, and then when you push straight on the top, it should just go in, which it did not do. It sounded like it did though, didn't it? Let's try it again. There we go. Battery's back in, power back on, hit the switch. Let's see if we get anything at all. Keeping in mind that after a BIOS reset, the system could take about 10 to 20 seconds longer to boot the very first time, as it has to sort out, figure out what hard drive you have and things like that. Of course, you will need to reset your date and time for sure. And then any other customizations, if you had any, and if you don't know, then just leave everything else alone. And this does not appear to have made any difference whatsoever. So the next thing I would check would be the RAM. So I'm going to pull the power. You'll see I'm going to wait for the fans to stop, and I'm going to hit that power button again. Oh, good, nothing happened. And I'm going to pull 2 sticks of this RAM. And there's a blue channel and a black channel. And I'm not sure if they're paired up the way they look, side by side, or if they're paired up in systems like you've seen me build where it's opposite. Oh wait, it tells me right up here, DIM 1, DIM 2, DIM 3, DIM 4. Well, Well, let's pull out 3 and 4. That's going to be these two here on the end. And we're going to see if this makes any difference at all. You'll see I'm touching the case, I'm touching metal. That makes sure I'm grounded. I'm also, as much as possible, trying to handle the RAM by the edges, but on this RAM, holding it by the top of the chips, trying to avoid touching anything metal, and of course having one hand on the case. Then I don't have to wear an anti-static strap. I'm going to plug this back in, and we're going to turn this back on. Oh, something different happened. It booted. Aha, it's one of these two. It's possible it could also be the socket. It's also possible something called chip crawl occurs over time, where the chip starts to work its way out of its socket. Although there are retention levers in here that hold the RAM in place, you simply can't trust it. So once again, pulling power, hit the power button, make sure all the power is drained. We're going to put one RAM module back in. That doesn't matter if it comes from the same socket or not. I'm simply doing this because this is it's going to be easier to plug them in side by side than to try and go in the middle. So I'm going to just plug that one RAM module back in and turn the system back on. And it appears, well, the fan's just slowed down. It's booting. Great. All right. So that means this RAM module is either bad or was not sitting, well, if it still boots with this RAM module in, that means one of the two weren't seated properly and they needed to be reseated. If I plug this in and it doesn't work, this is the problem. All right, so I'm gonna plug that back in. Put the power back on. And here we go. We're about to have the answer to this problem in moments. It's exciting, isn't it? Riveting. Nothing is happening. Still nothing. Still nothing. What do you think? You think I've waited long enough? I think I've waited long enough. Pull it. Pull the RAM module back out. Now, this is a 2 gig RAM module, so that means they must have 2, 4, 6 gigs. Did they have 8? Or, well, the way it says, it could be interpreted one of two ways. It's either part of a 2 gig kit, which would mean the pair of them equals 2 gigs. I'm going to assume that this is 2, and that he had a total of 2, 4, 6, 8 gigs of RAM, which I'm going to guess was also upgraded. I don't think the HP came with this, but maybe it did. But anyway, this appears to be our culprit. I expect it will boot just fine now. Or at least, power on self-test just fine. And then once we hook the drives back up, I've already heard the fan slow down just now. So what was I saying? So yeah, once we hook all the hard drives back up, I'm sure it's going to boot and operate just fine, and the customer will be able to get whatever data they want off of it and to then continue to use the computer or retire it as they see fit. I would say to retire it because I think they're just going to experience more problems as the computer gets older. Now, with regards to the old memory module, I destroy this, and the reason I destroy it is I never, ever want it to be a problem I have to diagnose in the future. Sometimes when you throw things away, people pull them out of the trash, and then somehow, some way, it ends up coming back to me in the future as something I need to fix again. So to avoid that, I just take these and I break them in half. That will never happen. And that's it. That's going to wrap up this video diagnostic. It was really just that simple, and now you understand what's going through my head when I'm trying to figure out what's wrong. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned from it. I hope it empowers you and encourages you to diagnose your own system or a friend's system and to solve that puzzle. It's a great feeling when you get the answer, and when you get the answer without any help and on your own. You know, once you've been taught the proper things to look for, you no longer are dependent on others. You're more self-sustaining, and as a result, the way you feel when you've accomplished it is beyond words. So once again, thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please be sure and click the like button, and also please click the subscribe button. If you want to be emailed every time I post a new video, you'll be the first to know. If you've already subscribed and you're not getting those emails, check your subscription to me and make sure the little checkbox for sending emails is checked, and that's the whole point of subscribing. Also, if there's any videos you'd like to see, be sure and let me know in the comments below. And of course, any feedback is welcome as long as it's put friendly. We're trying to create a community where we all support each other. So anybody who feels like they just want to disparage and put people down, don't even bother leaving a comment, because it's going to get removed. But anyway, thank you so much for watching. I will see you next time, and bye for now.